The economic slowdown in the US might crush the CCP's economy. Xi Jinping is uniting his neighbors against him in the South China Sea, and Kamala Harris's VP picks ties to China. And more on this week's China News headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So we all know China's economy is in trouble. If you don't know that, haven't you been paying attention to me? Subscribe and hit that bell to stay notified, if that's still a thing. It's bad even by the CCP's less than honest standards. But with fears of a US recession looming after poor economic performance in July, that could make China's economy suffer even more. Global stock markets had an awful day on August 5th, with the Nikkei index dropping 12.4%, its worst day since the Black Monday crash in 1987, which is almost as chaotic as Black Friday any year. Fears of a US recession triggered a worldwide sell-off of stocks, and that has pretty far-reaching consequences in of itself. But some analysts have even tossed the idea around that China could benefit from this if it were to economically recover and promote itself as a safe place for investment. But considering the poor state of the Chinese economy and the recent lackluster third plenum, that's not likely. As a matter of fact, according to the World Bank, the U.S. accounts for more than 15% of China's exports. A decline in U.S. demand would translate to a significant hit on export revenues and GDP growth for China. As it is, Beijing and Western countries have been escalating trade tensions, and an economic slowdown in Washington is likely to fan the flames of those tensions. Vietnam and the Philippines are teaming up for their first ever joint Coast Guard exercises. The commander of the Philippine Coast Guard welcomed the Vietnamese vessel, emphasizing the importance of cooperation and mutual understanding. That mutual understanding being they don't like the CCP. Now this is interesting because while both countries have territorial disputes with each other, clearly they see their collective territorial disputes with China as the bigger threat. Because China's doing a better job uniting humanity than the aliens in Independence Day. But the Philippines aren't done there. They also held joint sea exercises with Japan and the US. The exercise with Japan was the first ever joint naval drill between Tokyo and Manila. So a lot of firsts happening. It comes shortly after the Philippines and Japan signed a bilateral defense treaty. Meanwhile, the Philippines is also conducting a 2-day joint aerial and naval drill with the US, Canada, and Australia. But the CCP is also conducting its own military drills on the same day. And it just happens to be near the Scarborough Shoal, claimed by both the Philippines and China, even though China is very far away. China said on Wednesday that it carried out air and sea combat patrols near the Scarborough Shoal to test strike capabilities. I wonder who they want to strike. But it seems like all the players in the region are gearing up for war with China. Not only are Washington and Tokyo doing their own military drills, but as part of it, the U.S. Marines just deployed a new radar system on Japanese islands near Taiwan. The system was deployed on Yonaguni Island, which isn't far from Taiwan. It's not unusual for Chinese military ships, aircraft, and UAVs to pass by Yonaguni Island. In fact, just days before the drill, on Saturday, a Chinese Y-9 electronic intelligence aircraft and 2 UAVs, presumed to belong to China, carried out surveillance missions west of Taiwan and transited around Japan's southwest islands, passing near Yonaguni Island. And after the break, is Kamala Harris VP pick and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz too close to China? Welcome back. Vice President Kamala Harris has a new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Walz formerly served in the U.S. Army National Guard and was a representative in Congress. But he's already drumming up controversy for a number of reasons, including his ties to China. In 1989, Walz spent a year in China as a teacher. At the time, it was rare for Westerners to go to China, let alone teach there. Walz said China was coming, and that's the reason I went. Of course, that same year was also the Tiananmen Square massacre, and it must have left a big imprint on him because Walz chose to marry his wife on the 5th anniversary of the massacre. According to her, it was because he wanted to have a date he'll always remember. After he returned to the U.S., Walz and his wife set up a company called Educational Travel Adventures to coordinate summer trips to China for American high school students. Despite his love of the culture, Walz served on the Congressional Executive Commission on China, which monitors human rights and rule of law developments in China. And he co-sponsored a resolution about the CCP's forced organ harvesting. Outside of that, he's also been a critic of China's human rights abuses and is also a proponent of Tibetan autonomy. Yet he's also encouraged engagement and dialogue with the CCP to resolve those issues, and said that he disagrees that our relationship with China necessarily needs to be an adversarial one. Unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party is in charge of China, and it does view the US as an adversary. Always has. Unfortunately, Walz is part of the same engagement school that has botched US-China relations for decades. During his tenure as Minnesota's governor, Walz opposed Trump's trade war on China in 2019. He said that it was hindering our economy's growth and weakening our country's prosperity. Which is completely wrong. Chinese intellectual property theft and moving US manufacturing to China has devastated cities and towns across America. That kind of desperation led to an opioid epidemic that China is funding by pumping these very towns full of fentanyl. I really don't understand how people like Walz can see all the human rights abuses in China, rightfully condemn them, but still think we can do business with the people carrying out those abuses. Remember, China uses rape as a form of torture. I don't want to do business with them. A Chinese-American man was convicted of spying on dissidents for the CCP. Shujun Wang was convicted on Tuesday in the US on charges of using his reputation as a pro-democracy activist to gather information on dissidents and feed it to his homeland's government, which makes him the perfect spy since the last thing anyone would expect a CCP agent to be is pro-democracy. According to the assistant U.S. attorney, the defendant pretended to be opposed to the Chinese government so that he could get close to people who were actually opposed to the Chinese government. He even founded a pro-democracy group in New York called the Huyaobang Zhao Ziyang Memorial Foundation, but actually gathered information on Chinese dissidents and fed it to the CCP. That group is named after two CCP leaders from the 1980s who were widely seen as reformers and got purged for it. Wang was convicted of charges that includes conspiring to act as a foreign agent and faces up to a decade in jail. He's pleaded not guilty. According to prosecutors, Wang composed emails styled as diaries that recounted conversations, meetings, and plans of various critics of the Chinese government. One such diary was about commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre, while others were about planning protests during visits by Xi Jinping to the US. But rather than sending the emails and making a digital trail, Wang saved them as drafts that could be examined by Beijing's intelligence services as they used a shared password to log in. Wang's legal team tried to portray him as an open but chatty academic, but they aren't commenting to the press any further. Now, I've got a video I want to show you that you're going to love. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are tons of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni in 2022, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. So how do you protect yourself? You get as many of these companies as possible to delete your data from their system. That's what Incogni does for you. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 305 of these data brokers who've collected my info. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself and reclaim your own data. Go to incogni.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. And here's a video YouTube's algorithm thinks you'll like. Who are you to disagree with the algorithm? Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.